And welcome back, everybody, to week 2. This time, chapters 3 and 4. A lot of material to get through. I am Professor Andy Molnar. Let's get to it. I'm excited. It's good stuff coming. So, first, we start out with a conversation about the project manager. Who are you, or who am I, or who are we? Whatever the case may be, right? You want the project manager, regardless, to be chosen right as the project is selected. You want to grab the business documents from the C-suite, as we talked about last week, and begin to work on your project charter. You want to run it because you are ultimately responsible. Yeah, sure, sometimes they have to go hire a project manager, and they may get there late, later in the planning process or in execution. This is going to be very difficult to catch up because a lot of things have happened that you didn't have your fingers in, or your insights, or your knowledge, and you're responsible, right? And then one of the things so the last bullet says project manager begins with budget and schedule. Bam! I would also add scope, budget, schedule, and scope. Of course, you always begin with motivating, guiding, and mentoring your team as it grows too. So it can get very complex. It's not meant to be standalone. Now, we're working oftentimes with a functional manager. And a functional manager are stovepipes. They're responsible for functions. When I was in the Air Force, operations was a function, and that had every aviator: pilot, navigator, engineer, loadmaster, a medical crew that flew, etc. And then another function was maintenance. And maintenance and air crew were separate functions, right? They weren't in the same group. So that's a functional specialty. And most companies, especially the big ones, are organized that way. Might be organized around engineers or security, etc. Functions. And functions, in the end, own most of the resources because most projects will have an organizational format that is matrix. So we're going to borrow people to execute our project. So most of the expertise comes from these various functional managers. They have the subject matter experts. So a typical project management conversation might center around these job requirements. You're going to have to manage finance and pay the bills along the way. You're going to have to work with another function of engineers. What about procurement or contracts, right? You'll have to drive the planning, which incorporates all of their activities and integrates them into a unified, cogent whole. And you'll have to manufacture it and to do quality. Procurement and contracting are really the same things. These are just a sampling of some of the roles that you're going to play of integrating the various functions together. And so a project manager is usually a generalist. This doesn't mean we're not aware, right? And one of the things I like to tell people is when you study the PMBOK guide for a certification exam, for example, you should know that information at the expert level. That is enough information that in any one of these specialties allows you to ask the right questions. Things will not get around you. All the tools are there, and we're learning some of them in this course and all of them throughout the various courses at the university, right? And so you want to pick a project manager who you'd like them to have a little expertise. For example, maybe the language. If it's a medical, I know somebody that worked in a lab in a hospital, didn't like working in the lab because there was no upward mobility, became a project manager. And they were ideal because they understood the language of the medicine, of OR, of pharmacy, without being knee-deep in them. They were generalist, but had a little bit of knowledge. So be an expert at project management. Also get to know your industry and the best practices and language there also. And so project managers and function managers are often compared. In fact, there's a power struggle that goes on that you need to be aware of, right? So if you work in a functional organization and you're assigned a project as a project manager, you're going to have very little authority. Most of the authority resides with the functional manager, who's probably also going to manage the budget. But if you work in a projectized organization, You are the project manager are going to have most of the power, most of the authority, and manage the budget yourself, right? And in between, there are matrixed organizations where a matrix organization can be a weak, which would favor the functional, a balanced, which is equal power between the project manager and the functional manager, and a strong, which would be favor the project manager. And so remember, the functional managers own the expertise, and you are borrowing them. It's important that you create good relationships with them so that you can maybe hand pick the person you want, or if you don't hand pick them, maybe they ensure, because you have a good relationship and they understand the value of your project, that they will make sure the right person with good qualifications are scheduled for your project, right? And then, of course, when you're done with them, you want to release them right away. That functional manager has other work for them to do. And it's about being a good steward and giving feedback, right, to the functional manager as well as the employee themselves. So, 3 major questions facing project managers: what needs to be done, when must it be done, and how are the resources required? There is a lot. There are whole papers you could write just on this one slide alone. And so what needs to be done, I see it as the scope. What must be done is the schedule, and the resources are around cost. And between scope, schedule, and cost, resourcing impacts all of them. So 4 very important knowledge areas of project management that you should always consider in every one of your answers: scope, schedule, cost, resource. I would also include risk and quality. So these are major questions facing a project manager. There are many more. And it will depend on how you deal with them based on the responsibilities you have based on the company you work for, right? And so you'll have responsibilities to the parent company, to the project and the client team, and to the project team. Your responsibilities will differ, but all of these people have one thing in common, and that's that we call them stakeholders. They were all stakeholders. The definition of a stakeholder, according to the Project Management Institute, is any person, organization, or group that is impacted or may be impacted by a project decision or output, right? And so these are all stakeholders and should be considered. I then break stakeholders out into key stakeholders. To me, those are decision makers, and those I focus on more often, especially when I'm doing interviews, things like that. And so, but all of these things are going to help you manage your use of resources. Your company will dictate what you can get access to. Your project team is going to make sure that they have the right balance of team players, knowledge, background, the timing of when they arrive and when they leave your project, etc. So that you work together to create this rhythm, this cadence that supports the functional manager's needs, supports your needs, supports corporate needs, and the individual as well. Now, the project and the client has a special kind of relationship, as could be imagined. You're building this deliverable. Remember, that's in general a product, service, or result meant to produce some capability, right, that you're looking for. And so they're the ones that are going to give you some of the requirements, not all of them, but some of them. They're the ones that are going to give you some other constraints, perhaps budget, but they're also the ones that are going to sign off on your deliverables at the various phase gates along the way, and in the end to accept it by signing off for it. So you want a good relationship with them. Keep them informed of major changes that can cost a lot of money. Now, the project team is also very special organization. They are also stakeholders, as well as you, the project manager, are a stakeholder. And so the project team is somebody that generally, in a matrixed organization or functional, only works for you during the project. Actually, in a projectized organization, They really only work for the company at all during the project, and when the project's over, they're released. Express Scripts is one organization that is like that. Now, the people that work there are the first ones called back for the next project, and the people I know that work there enjoy that lifestyle. They'll work for 8 months, they'll get a couple months off, take care of some priorities in their life, and then they know they're back to work, right? But the project manager wants to look out for everyone's future, regardless of whether they're a permanent member of your team or a transitory member of your team, or they won't have a role after the work. So consider your performance appraisals, consider your feedback, consider your training that goes into making them a better employee and happier along the way. And so part of that would include take care of yourself, right? And be aware of your own career path that you can take as a project manager. There is just so much you could go into on this slide alone that it's hard to address. But it is a great career field. I would tell everybody, be a great project manager, which means always, every day, building on your management skills, leadership skills, interpersonal skills, and technical skills. Technical skills come in two parts: that of a project manager's technical skills, like the PMBOK guide, and the technical skills of the industry you work on. In addition to that, and so just realize you're always building those skills. The role of an IT project manager is valuable, is needed, for example, and pays a fortune, and you can work just about anywhere. In fact, that's the case in most project management career fields. And career paths continue to be clarified as the world realizes the value of a project manager. You can be a trainee, right? This is part of a training curriculum, right? You could be an engineer, site manager. A site manager directs usually like a factory facility or something. A project project manager or a program manager. A program manager manages multiple projects that are related. That's the definition there. The point is, I've had leaders in the Air Force. They call them wing commanders. They will lead 5,000 people on a single base. And I taught a retired wing commander project management. And at the end, he said to me, Andy, A, that was like getting a root canal without Novocaine, right? It's painful. But he said, B, I wish I'd have had this information before I was a wing commander. I could have used it, right? It's that valuable. And so even if you don't intend to remain a project manager, it is useful in whatever path you choose. They will look at it and go, okay, they know how to lead, manage, drive technical things to conclusion along the way. And part of the reason that you're paid what you are the special demands on you as the project manager, right? As you collect the right resources, maybe train up the ones that need, you're constantly motivating, developing the team, managing the team, right? You're always making trade-offs, especially between the triple constraints we talked about last week: scope, schedule, and cost, to keep your project on track. And so you're constantly communicating. 90% of what you do is communication, and a lot of that involves negotiation along the way. And so part of that is you'll have to acquire the various resources that you're going to need to make the project execute. And that will also include some of those same features, as well as I just mentioned, motivating the personnel. There are multiple motivational theories you can get to know. Maslow's hierarchy of needs and expectation theory, etc., right? And there are just so many of them. Herzberg's theory, hygiene theory, that you can get to know that will help you drive a better project along the way, right? Because we want the workers to feel empowered. We want them to feel tied to the project, right? We'll take a break now and come back with important characteristics for team.